Verbal reasoning is one of the most different sections on the selective entry exam to questions you may have seen at school. And so it's a section where if you want to get into Melbourne High, Mac.Rob, Nossal or Suzanne, Cory, you want to prepare for and you want to make sure you're confident with all the different types of questions that we usually see in this section. And so getting started for a high level look at what is verbal reasoning. Well, at this stage, you get 60 questions in 30 minutes. And so it's one of the most time-pressured sections of the exam. In terms of what verbal reasoning is, it's more of an English-based section. And if we break apart, what does verbal mean? Verbal means essentially words or language. And then reasoning means our ability to understand the meaning and the relationship between those words. And so verbal reasoning is more like an aptitude test, more like an IQ test, this section. And it's really about understanding how well we can understand the meaning of different words and language and the relationship between different words and language as well. And these really are the different types of questions that come up a lot. There is other questions that come up here and there, and some years we see new question types appear. For example, on the last one, we saw a few new things, but these are ones which across verbal reasoning exams, on the selective entry exam, but also really all across the world, these are the question types that come up a lot. Now, one of the big ones is vocabulary. So we will spend a bit on this, but you do need to have a strong vocab to excel in the verbal reasoning section of the exam. And that's something that does take time to build. And so that's one of the earliest things. Right at the start of your preparation, you want to start doing things to boost your vocab, which we'll speak about a few of those things in this video, because that's going to give you a big advantage. You can't cram vocab in a week, in 2 weeks. And so if you build that over a year or even longer, you're going to have a massive advantage over other people. Another new question type was argument evaluation, which is assessing the validity or how logical certain arguments are. We'll have a look at that one in today's video as well. Then the third one is conditional statements. These ones, a lot of students find fairly difficult, so we'll look at these as well. These three top ones here were probably the most prevalent question types on the last selective entry exam. So the three in particular I would put a lot of emphasis on. That's what we're going to focus on in today's video. Four other ones: ordering information, logic statements, translating languages and classifying attributes. These ones come up quite a bit as well. Some of them didn't come up quite as much last year. Although below this video, you can download a full selective entry mock exam. You can have a look at some of these questions for yourself. But today we're going to mainly focus on these top three. What can you do to prepare yourself to succeed in these? Because this is where a lot of the marks were. Particularly vocab can often be anywhere from 20% of questions on the exam up to 50 or 60%. Argument evaluation last year was surprisingly a lot. There was about 10, 15 questions on that, and conditional statements, there was a good chunk as well. So this is going to cover you for a big chunk of the exam based on what we saw last year. Now, in terms of what success looks like, this is the scorecard that you'll get after the exam. So you get a score for each section of the exam. Verbal reasoning is classified here under the general ability section, which essentially just means it's more in that aptitude IQ test category. It's not so much testing things that you would have learned at school. It's testing different things that aren't really things you would normally do in day-to-day life in maths or English at school. Now, what we want to aim for, just like this student here achieved, is we want to get a top 10% score. We want to be top 10% out of all the students sitting this section, which just means for each section of the exam, they rank everyone's scores from best to worst. You want to be in the top 10%, because if you do that, that's going to give you the best chance of getting into a selective school. Generally, from what we're seeing, you want to get 3 sections in the top 10% at least, and the other 2 probably in the top 20% to give yourself the best possible chance of getting into one of these schools. Now, as we spoke about, vocab is a massive part of this section. It can sound a bit boring working on your vocab, but it's going to help you in verbal reasoning. It's going to help you in reading. It's going to help you writing. So building your vocab is one of the best things to do if you want to get really good at these types of aptitude tests and just selective entry exam preparation overall. And so how can you improve your vocabulary? Well, the first thing is to understand how do they actually test vocab on this exam. And there's 4 major question types that we see a lot on verbal reasoning exams. One is asking for antonyms. So an antonym is, of course, a word with the opposite meaning. So in this case, it says what is an antonym for delineate. So we're looking for what's a word with the opposite meaning to delineate. Another one is synonyms. So synonyms are, of course, words that have a similar or the same meaning. So it's what's a synonym for distinguish. This one here is another one that's a little bit more specific to this exam, which is all these words are alike in some way. Prudent, wary, and circumspect. Which word could also fit? So that's another one there. And then this final one here, which is which of the following is the odd word out. So you can see all of these questions, they're all pretty similar. They're really just testing your vocab skills in different ways. Testing, can you find antonyms? Can you find synonyms? Can you find which word doesn't fit with the rest? They can change these up a little bit, but really it's testing your vocab. If you have a strong vocab, you're going to understand more of these words. It's going to be easy to get the right answer. If you don't have a strong vocab, it's more likely there'll be questions with words where you don't understand them too well, and it's just going to make it a lot harder if you don't understand the meaning of them. So there's kind of two strategies on how you can improve your vocab skills. There's a meta strategy, which is more overarching, which is more long-term, which is going to give you the biggest rate of improvement, but it takes more time. And then there's also specific strategies for each question that can just make your accuracy on them a little bit better. And if you don't actually know some of the words, it can make it easier to get it right. So we'll start with the meta strategy first, which really the easiest way to excel in vocab questions is just to have a strong vocabulary. The more words that you know, the more words that you understand, the more likely the questions that come up on the exam are going to be ones that you already know. Now, over the span of a few months, particularly if you have 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, beyond 12 months, you can really improve your vocab. You can easily add 500 to 600 words per year. So there's some people who I see who they start trying to boost their vocab in year 5, and then by the time they get to the exam, their vocab is increased by several thousand words, and they're pretty well set up for success. Now, there's a few free resources which I'd recommend. One is a book called Barron's 1,100 Words to Know. It's a good resource to use. Otherwise, vocabulary.com has some quizzes on different words. There's essentially a few that you get per day, and then beyond that, you do have to pay a small fee for vocabulary.com. Otherwise, what we've done in our program is we kind of built like a vocab builder, which I went through all the exams I could possibly find. All the words students had told me were on the exam, we put that into our own vocab builder and test students on. But regardless, whether you're in our program, whether you're using Barron's 1,100 Words You Need to Know or vocabulary.com, they're all good resources. It really doesn't matter. You just want to do it consistently. So even if you just bought this book for about 10, 20 bucks, they're not really free, they're just very cheap resources, then you could easily significantly improve your performance on this exam, because these Barron's 1,100 Words to Know come up a lot on the exam. Same thing with vocabulary.com. These ones, they start a bit easier, so you will need to do it for a little bit more time, but they do equip you pretty well. So both of them, great resources. If you work on them for 3, 6, 12 months beyond, your vocab is going to improve significantly and your scores are going to go up in this section. The other easy thing, which is very cheap as well, is just reading regularly. If you're willing to say, I'm going to read for 15 minutes every single day between now and the exam, that's going to give you a big advantage. If you then do the key step, which is creating a vocab list. So a vocab list, think of it like a document where every single time you see a word that you don't know, you just note it down and you note down the definition next to it. And then maybe every few days or every week, you come back to that list, you revise it, and then over time, you're going to learn heaps of new words. And so improving your vocab, it's super easy. You really don't need to do anything overly extraordinary to improve your vocab. Even just reading things online, newspapers, books, articles, anything you can. And whenever you see a word that you don't know, noting it down into your vocab list, coming back and revising that vocab list regularly, that's going to do the trick. You're going to improve your vocab heaps just by doing that. So that's probably the easiest possible way to improve your vocab, is just reading regularly and widely. As soon as you see a word you don't know, add it to the list and then revise that list. Your vocab's going to improve by heaps. So that's kind of the meta strategy, which is focused on improving your overall vocab so you understand more words. So there's a higher chance when questions come up, you know the words rather than you don't. Now, the specific strategy is there's a number of different ones for the different question types. They're all pretty similar, so I'll just show you one of them, which is for odd word out. So this question type is kind of perfect to show the strategy. So what you want to do is, for this question here, you can see it says, which of the following is the odd word out? So we're looking for which word does not fit with the rest. And these words, I'd say they're not particularly easy. Like complex is easy, but convoluted, intricate, perplexed, they're a little bit harder. They're not super basic words. They're not super advanced, but they're not the most easy words. And this is kind of the 3-step strategy that we'd recommend for these question types. Step 1 is to find 2 words that are clearly alike. For example, complex and convoluted. What you'll notice is even with the really hard questions, there's normally always going to be 2 options that you do understand. Complex and convoluted both mean the same thing. Something's a bit complex. It's a bit complicated. They both mean the same thing there. Second thing is to identify the similarity between the two words like we just did. They both mean something to be a bit complicated. And then step 3 is to use this meaning to find the odd word out. So intricate, could that mean something that's a little bit complex or complicated? I'd say it probably could. Something that's intricate, there's a lot of details to it, it's maybe a bit complicated. Whereas perplexed, that's more an emotion. We're confused, we're unsure what's happening. And so that doesn't have the same meaning. And so in this case, perplexed was the odd word out and C was the correct answer there because it was wrong. Now, there's one other trick which you can use. So generally that applies to all question types. Find two that you understand the meaning of. Distinguish in your mind what is the meaning of those two words and then cross-check that against the other options because there's generally always going to be two you do understand. The other thing that works really well is trying to put each word into a sentence. So for example, I could say, this lesson was very complex. This lesson was very convoluted. This lesson was very intricate. We can all put them into a sentence and it makes sense. Whereas if I said, this lesson was very perplexed, makes no sense. So immediately it exposes that option as being wrong. And so personally, this is a method that I like to use for basically all of these questions if I'm unsure. Try and put the words into a sentence. It almost always exposes the option that just doesn't make sense. So that's probably a good tip there. So you can apply this not just for this question type, but for all of them. Find two words that mean the same thing, understand the meaning, use that meaning to cross-check against other options. If you're unsure still, put the words into a sentence. It will help you find the right answer. So in terms of vocab questions, they come up a lot. Two best strategies, use that specific strategy to increase your accuracy on questions. But overall, you just want to build your vocab. That's the fastest, it's the easiest. It's going to have the biggest bang for your buck in terms of improving your scores in this section. Now, conditional statements. This is another type of question that comes up quite a bit on the exam. And it's one that people often find more difficult at the start. Now, what conditional statements questions actually are, is they're assessing your ability to comprehend the logical connections between different sets of words or categories. So here's an example. It says here, assume that all pills are kills, some kills are ills, and some rills are wills. Therefore, it makes sense that, and it has a whole bunch of different options. The key thing is, these questions, if you just try and somehow solve them in your head, you're not going to have much success and you're probably going to get them wrong a lot of the time. You want to have a method for them. And the method for these is understanding Venn diagrams. So Venn diagrams, if you can understand Venn diagrams, if you can use Venn diagrams, these questions are generally always very easy because you can just plot out the Venn diagrams. That will tell you the answer. Venn diagrams really are just a graphical way of showing the relationship between different things. And because these questions are testing your ability to identify the relationship between different things, they're the perfect tool that we need. There's two key things we need to know how to draw in terms of Venn diagrams. We need to be able to draw the relationship of some and the relationship of all. And so the first one is if some joggers are marathon runners. And if we think about what does this mean? It means there's a group of joggers over here. There's a group of marathon runners over here. Some of these marathon runners also jog, and some of these joggers also run marathons. There's a bit of a mingling between them. And that's why you can see here we've got the joggers in a circle, we've got the marathon runners in a circle, and they're mingling together in the middle, like this here, because some of them do both. So this part here is where it's just joggers. This part here is where it's just marathon runners. And this part here in the middle would be joggers and marathon runners, people who do both. So the first thing is we need to be able to represent some joggers are marathon runners. A key thing here is if we say some joggers are marathon runners, that also means that some marathon runners are joggers. It goes both ways. So it doesn't really matter on the ordering. It could say some joggers are marathon runners. That also means some marathon runners are joggers. So it goes both ways there. This one here is a little bit different. So this is when we're representing all. So if we said all joggers are marathon runners, that obviously means something very different. That means that there's a massive group of marathon runners. There's 100 of them. And there's some joggers amongst those marathon runners. But every single jogger also runs marathons. There's maybe 10 joggers out of the 100 marathon runners. But every single jogger also runs marathons. And so that's why the little jogger circle is a part of the bigger marathon runner circle. Yes, there is some joggers, but all of the joggers also run marathons. And that's why they're a part of this bigger group of marathon runners. Key question, this is where most people will go wrong. If all joggers are marathon runners, does that mean that some joggers are marathon runners? What do you think? Now the answer is no, because we need to be precise. So when we say some, it means that some joggers are marathon runners, but some are not. Some are, but some are not. And so if we drew this here and then we said some joggers are marathon runners, we would also be saying some joggers are not marathon runners, which doesn't make sense. And so we have to be precise. If this is the relationship, all joggers are marathon runners, we can't just say some of them are marathon runners because that doesn't make sense. That's kind of the key thing. When we say some, it means some are, some aren't. And that's how we draw it like this. When we say all, it means all of them are. There's none that do not. And so we draw it like this here. It also doesn't mean that all marathon runners are joggers. So in this case here, some joggers are marathon runners, some marathon runners are joggers. It goes both ways. In this case here, it kind of makes sense, but if all joggers are marathon runners, obviously all marathon runners do not jog because this is a tiny circle amongst the bigger circle. So this is something that you might need to spend a little bit of time getting your head around. Once you understand Venn diagrams, which typically probably takes people maybe 1 week or 2 at the most to get really confident with, if you really focus on it, you can improve very quick. And that's one key thing overall in the selective entry exam, which is recommended, which is rather than spending heaps of time doing random stuff every week, doing 10 different questions each week, just pick one, master it, then move on to the next. There's no point just doing one, not feeling very good on it, and then moving on to learning something new. Just focus on conditional statements, for example, until you're confident, until when you see these questions you think super easy, I'm going to get it right every single time, then you're going to be good. So if we go back to this question here, it says, assume that all pills are kills, some kills are rills, and some rills are wills. Now you can see there's 3 different relationships. All pills are kills, some kills are rills, and some rills are wills. So let's plot that out with a Venn diagram. First one, all pills are kills. We do that, of course, like this. All of the pills are a part of the bigger group of kills. Second one is some kills are rills. So we know when we represent some, there should be 2 circles mingling together. So there should be a K circle with an R circle mingling together, exactly like this. And so now we've got 2 of the relationships plotted down with Venn diagrams. Final one, some rills are wills. So again, some rills should be mingling with the wills, and it should look exactly like this. And this really does tell us, therefore, if we look at the answers here, assume that all pills are kills, some kills are rills, and some rills are wills. We can see that's all plotted correctly here. Let's cross-check them against the answers, which I've already got here on screen. So are all kills rills? All kills pills, sorry. All kills are not pills. All pills are kills. So that one's wrong. B, all wills are kills. All wills are not kills. C, are some pills kills? No. All pills are kills, not some. And then finally, are some rills are wills? Some rills are, in fact, wills. So that was a nice and easy one. So D was correct there. And so really the key thing with conditional statements is you want to become confident with Venn diagrams. If you're confident with Venn diagrams, you'll get these questions right every single time. If you're not, then it's more likely you're going to find these questions a little bit more difficult. And so what we might do is we might just do one more quick example now, which is this one here. So assume that all jacks are whacks, all whacks are sacks, and all sacks are jacks. Therefore, it makes sense that no jacks are sacks, no whacks are jacks, some sacks are whacks, or some sacks are yaks. Now, obviously, this is not going to be able to be solved just in your head. You're going to have to use Venn diagrams here. So let's do what we did last time. Let's plot each relationship. So the first one is all jacks are whacks. So the jacks should be a part of the bigger circle of whacks, which is what we've done. The jacks, part of the bigger circle of whacks. Second one, all whacks are sacks, which means whacks should be a part of a bigger circle of sacks. And so that should be like this. So we've got jacks in the circle of whacks and whacks in the circle of sacks. And then now sacks are a part of a bigger group of yaks. And so we represent that like this. And so now if we want to cross-check for the right answer, is it true that no jacks are sacks? Now, some jacks are sacks because some of these jacks are in this big sack circle, so that's not correct. B, is it true that no whacks are yaks? None of these whacks are yaks, that's not true as well. C, some sacks are whacks. Some sacks are, in fact, whacks. And so that makes sense. Not all sacks are not whacks, but some are. And so C was correct here. D, some sacks are yaks. It's actually all sacks are yaks. So D is wrong as well. So C was the right answer here. So really what I'd recommend, the takeaway from conditional statements is you need to become confident with Venn diagrams. If you're confident with representing both of these relationships, some and all, and you understand the little tips and tricks that I talked about, how, for example, some joggers are marathon runners, that means some marathon runners are joggers. Once you understand that really, really well and you're fast at plotting it down, because you will have pen and paper on the exam, you can quickly write these things down, these questions will become fairly confident. You'll become confident with as well. Now, final one is argument evaluation. This question type was fairly new. We haven't really seen it before. This is what it looked like. So what it did is it presented a statement followed by several arguments. And your task was to determine which argument best supports a statement. What this is testing is it's testing your critical thinking and logical reasoning skills. It's good because it's a fairly easy question to really master, I'd say, but it also helps you for other sections. For example, persuasive writing and essay writing. If you have the skills required to be a strong persuasive writer, a strong essay writer, it carries over to these questions really well. So this question here, it says school uniforms should be mandatory. Which of the following arguments is a stronger support for the statement? Now, you might be able to get the answer to this one right away. You may not. This one's not too difficult. In this case, it says school uniforms should be mandatory. What's the best support for this statement? Is it that students will be more disciplined? Is it that school uniforms will reduce bullying? Is it that school uniforms are expensive? Or is it they create a sense of community? Well, the way to find the right answer is we need to understand what makes an answer incorrect. And essentially what they're testing is they're testing for gaps in our logic. The answers here that are not correct, they suffer from something called the logical fallacy, which is a trick in our mind that tricks us from coming up with something that's logical. So we'll have a look at these now quickly. But essentially there's a number of tricks that they put in the options. If you can spot these tricks, you'll be able to spot the incorrect options. So the first trick that they often do is they'll put an irrelevant statement. For example, public parks increase property values. For the statement, cities should build more public parks. Now the fact that public parks increase property values doesn't really impact the fact that cities should build them. The city's decision to build them or not isn't really linked to private owners' property values. So often they'll have a statement that is true, but doesn't directly support the statement. For example, they might have something like, should schools ban junk food in school canteens? And they'll have a statement like, healthy food is vital for everyone. Now, it's probably true, but it's not really relevant to that decision. It's a little bit sort of random. And so that's one thing to look out for, sentences that are true, but are irrelevant. Second one is generalizations. So a generalization is when we make a big statement without sufficient evidence. So for example, online education is as effective as traditional education because it's convenient. Online education is effective because my friend succeeded in an online course. And so these ones here are examples where we're generalizing a little bit. It's as effective as traditional education because it's convenient. Kind of generalizing a bit. There's not enough evidence to support it there. Same thing this one here. It's effective because my friend succeeded in an online course. Just because one person succeeded doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone else. So that's one thing to be mindful of. Number 3, appeals to emotion. So when they appeal to emotion, this is a big sign that it's probably not going to be the right answer. Something like animal testing is cruel and inhumane. Whilst that might be true, we want the most logical, factual, objective answer. Not something like, oh, junk food's bad, so we should not eat it. Or this is mean, so don't do that. Those emotion-based answers are generally not correct. Number 4, false cause. So when we assume a cause and effect relationship without sufficient evidence, this is another one where it's a logical fallacy that comes up quite a lot. So for example, saying implementing a 4-day work week increases employee productivity because employees are happier. The relationship between a 4-day work week and employee productivity and them being happier, we're making a few assumptions there. They could be happier for a number of different reasons, aside from just the fact that it's a 4-day work week. So we've got to be careful. The biggest thing overall with all of these logical fallacies is we have to be careful not to make assumptions. We have to be careful not to make assumptions. That's what most of it comes down to. If we make big generalizations, we're making an assumption of some kind. If just because one friend got into a selective school, that means we should just follow everything that they did. We're making an assumption that what worked for them is the most objective method for getting in. And so we need to be really careful about assumptions in this section. Now, there's a few more logical fallacies. One is slippery slope, which is when we assume one action will lead to another. For example, banning smoking in public places will lead to more bans on personal behavior. That may or may not happen. Not always going to happen. Appeals to authority. So just because an expert says it doesn't mean we should do it. For example, it might says, Mr. Johnson says that junk food should be banned in schools. He's very smart. That doesn't mean that we should follow just because one expert says it. We need a more objective opinion. And then subjectivity. When you see these ones, I think exercise is the best way to lose weight, so it must be true. Things that come from I, probably not going to be correct as well. And so these logical fallacies, similar to the conditional statements, it's worth spending some time understanding them, coming up with examples for yourself of each one, so you can really understand what they mean in more detail. Let's have a look at a quick question here now, which is public transportation should be free for all citizens. Which of the following arguments is the strongest support for this statement? Is it number 1, free public transportation encourages more people to use it? Is it B, free public transportation reduces traffic congestion? Is it C, it can lead to higher taxes? Or is it a right? So this one here, saying it's a right, I'd say is kind of personal opinion. I don't think this is necessarily a right, but probably more someone's opinion. And so this particular one probably suffers from the logical fallacy of being an opinion. It's a right, that's more someone's opinion. This one here, free public transportation can lead to higher taxes. It could, but we do not know that for certain. And so this is probably an example of a slippery slope, where we're saying just because public transportation is now free, that could mean that that's funded through higher taxes, but it may not. And so that's a slippery slope. This one here, free public transport reduces traffic congestion. Now, it definitely could reduce it, so it's a legitimate option. We could be making a bit of an assumption, but it could be logical as well. Well, let's see the first one. It encourages more people to use it. So both of these are pretty similar, I would say. What's the better reason why it should be free for all citizens? Now, would they make it free just so people use it? I'd say this one's probably not quite as strong. Because yes, it would encourage more people to use it, but that's not really selling the benefit. The benefit is if more people use it, then it could reduce traffic congestion. And so I'd say this one here, number B, is probably the best answer. This one here is maybe potentially the logical fallacy of being a little bit irrelevant. Now, the reason I say that, some people might think, well, how? Because it seems fairly relevant. It's just because we're asking here, should public transportation be free? What's the strongest argument to support why it should be free? Now, if you imagine some council sitting around a desk, they wouldn't necessarily say, we just want people to use public transport. We don't care about any other benefit. We just want them using it just for no reason. They want people to use it for a reason. And that reason is probably to get more cars off the road to reduce traffic congestion. And so this statement here is a little bit irrelevant. It's not quite at the core of the reason, which is probably that if public transportation is free, people are more likely to use it, which is going to reduce traffic congestion, which is probably going to hopefully have a positive impact on driving times into the city, for example. And so I'd say B is probably the best answer there. And so let's have a look at one more example, which is this one here. Exercise should be part of the daily school curriculum. Which of the following arguments is a stronger support for this statement? Is it that exercise always improves academic performance? Now, this to me seems to be suffering from the logical fallacy of being a generalization. It's making a big assumption there. It always improves academic performance. It may do for some students, but to say for every single student, no matter what it always does, is a bit of a jump. It's a bit of an assumption. This one here, Mr. Johnson finds that exercise reduces stress and anxiety. This is an example of an appeal to authority. Just because it has a Mr. in front of his name, it's trying to trick us into picking that as the option, but that doesn't mean it's correct. This one here, a team of principals all called for the inclusion of exercise. Again, I think this is maybe an appeal to authority. It's a bit better than this one. Let's have a look at this one here. Exercise helps in maintaining physical health. So that's more factual. That's more objective. And so I'd say this one again here is more of an appeal to authority. This is the best answer. Why would they introduce, or why should exercise be a part of the daily school curriculum? It's because it helps in maintaining physical health. Physical health is important. And so that's the best one here. And so what you can see is once you understand the different traps that you can fall into, maybe I'm making a generalization. Maybe I'm assuming. Maybe I'm just appealing, getting convinced by authority. Maybe I'm getting convinced by someone's opinion. Maybe this is just a random statement that's not actually linked to the question. Once you can see all these different traps, it's very easy to narrow it down to the correct answer. And so I would spend a bit of time thinking about what are the different traps that can come up. You'll maybe notice some different ones yourself as you do more of these questions as well. You think, there's often an incorrect answer that is this. This is suffering from this trap. that can really help you. So the logical fallacies we went through are just a few. There's more than 60. If you want to read a book on logical fallacies, a very good one is by Charlie Munger, and it's called Poor Charlie's Almanac. And it goes through about 60. He calls them cognitive biases rather than logical fallacies, but they're things that trick us, that trick our logic, that make us think less clearly, which is what these questions are looking for. So that's a good book if you want to go super deep into that area. Now, what we've done in today's session so far is we looked at 3 common question types that come up on these exams. We looked at vocabulary questions. We spoke about the best strategy is just to boost your vocabulary overall. You'll know more words. When these questions come up, you'll be more confident with more of them. You'll get more of them correct. Best way of doing that is probably realistically just reading, making a vocab list, revising that vocab list regularly. Otherwise, we also spoke about a specific strategy you can use to improve your accuracy on the questions themselves. We then looked at conditional statements. Conditional statements is all about understanding the relationships between different things. The key tool you need is Venn diagrams. If you're confident with these questions will not be hard. You will be able to get all of them correct every single time. And then same thing for argument evaluation. This is a key skill that you want to spend time on. You want to understand what makes something logical, what makes something not logical. You want to understand logical fallacies, tricks in our thinking, because it will help you with these questions, but it will also help you, for example, when you're writing an essay, come up with arguments that are strong, that are logical, and explain them in a strong and logical way. So this is a key skill that is definitely worth spending your time on. And so we've looked at 3 of these 7 or so pretty common questions within verbal reasoning. Again, like I mentioned, there's free practice questions below this video. Download them, have a look at the other question types, and you'll be able to get a bit of a sense for what the overall type of questions are that come up in this section of this exam, but also what a whole exam feels like. I'd recommend go through, do all 60 questions in 30 minutes. You'll get a sense for the timing. The good thing is a lot of these questions are pretty quick. They're not ones that you really have to do a lot of working out for. Conditional statements ones are a little bit more so like that. But you can imagine these vocab ones, you can race through these very fast. And so in terms of exam strategy, that leads us pretty well onto that. You really want to be cautious that yes, you have 60 questions in 30 minutes, but that does not mean that you should spend 30 seconds on each question. It means you should identify the questions where you should spend 10 seconds and save time. For example, the vocab ones, you really don't need to spend 30 seconds on those. You should just know the answer basically instantaneously. Whereas conditional statements, you have to get your pencil out, you have to draw the Venn diagrams, you have to think it through. You probably want to have a little bit more time than that. You probably want to have maybe 40 seconds. And so you want to be tactical with how you use your time. Same thing is every single mark on this exam is worth 1 mark. You don't lose any marks for getting questions wrong. And so you want to get all the easy marks first, secure them all, then leave hard ones for the end. Because verbal reasoning is like any section on this exam. You don't need 99% to get in the top 10% of students, which is what we saw we're aiming for. This student here got that. You probably need maybe 80, 90% at the most. And so that means you can afford to skip 5 questions, I'd probably say. You can safely skip 5 questions and leave them till the end. And there will be questions that are designed to waste your time, take a minute or 2 minutes, and they're kind of traps. They're questions where a lot of students, often they're at the start of the exam, they'll do them, they'll waste a bunch of time, they'll run out of time, they'll miss super easy marks at the end of the exam. Maybe really easy, fast vocab ones. And so you want to be strategic with the way that you spend your time. Get all the easy marks first, leave the super hard questions or trap questions until the end, then have a go at them if you have the chance. If you don't, then answer them, just guess them, because you never want to leave any questions blank. Because even if you guess them, you'll probably get 1 or 2 correct. And so in this session, we've kind of gone through a lot around how to excel in the verbal reasoning section of the exam. I'd recommend this is a section where you want to really focus on vocab. If you improve in vocab, it's immediately going to improve your score by a lot. And so that's the first thing that I'd recommend doing. Start reading regularly, start boosting your vocab, make that vocab list, improve it and revise it on a weekly basis. And over time, it's going to have a pretty big impact on your score. So good luck. I look forward to seeing how you go in verbal reasoning. If you're looking for our help and helping you succeed in the verbal reasoning section of the exam, then there's a link below this video where you can book in for a call. You can hear about our tutoring programs that we run. Otherwise, there'll be lots more of these videos coming as well for the different sections of the exam. And don't forget, there's a free mock exam below this video as well. And so good luck. Look forward to hearing your progress in verbal reasoning and seeing you in another video very soon.